Hello and thank you for watching. John here to take you on a quick tour of RoutingBox to show you how fleets across New York State are utilizing RoutingBox to get on a route to better business and grow their business without limitations. I don't want to take up too much of your time today, so I'm going to go ahead and get... Alright, the first thing I'd like to cover with you today is some back-end setup stuff. I know it's not exciting. These are things that you really only do one time for the most part, and then you'll have some little tweaks as you go throughout the course of your operation. But I think it's important to understand some of the cool information that we're going to keep on the back end here in order to understand how some of the processes on the front end of RoutingBox that you work with every day will work. So the first thing I want to touch on is drivers and vehicles, and I think these do a really good job of showing you the flexibility that RoutingBox has. You can use these for really as much or as little as you want. For drivers, we can keep it very basic and just keep their name, their contact information, position, their license information for attestation and billing, and their address. So very straightforward. Or we can make this a full HR profile with everything, with their payroll information, all their employee information. You can even attach documents and create custom fields if you want to collect information that RoutingBox doesn't have. So these three fields, last CPR training, last medical check, and favorite food, are all custom fields that we created for our RoutingBox demo. So whatever information you would like to house within RoutingBox, you can create those custom fields and house that information. The same thing goes for vehicles. We can have it very simple with the name of the vehicle, class and capacity, and plate information, or you can take it further, create custom fields around maintenance events that need to happen. You can take notes for maintenance events that needs to happen. If your drivers are doing vehicle inspections through the mobile app, which you'll see a little bit later, the odometer reading will update so you can keep track of that. So again, these can be used for as much or as little as you want, and that's really how a lot of RoutingBox works. It's built to be flexible, to work for all different types of transporters, to help them run their business the way they need to. The next piece I would like to show you is our zone feature. So this is going to come up when it comes to scheduling, but zones are really sets of zip codes. So we're going to go ahead and take those zip codes and put them together so that you can quickly and easily see all the trips within that zone. Now this could be used for billing. This could be used if you have separated fleets. This could be used just simply to make more efficient schedules. You can have zip codes within more than one zone, so if you need it for multiple reasons, you can go ahead and do that. That's no problem. The last piece we're going to touch on is your accounts, which are your payers, and the services screen. So your account screen, again, these are the folks that are paying you, whether it be private pay accounts, brokers, nursing homes, etc. You'll see that the account screen takes in some basic information, contact information. You can see some statistics around the trips that they're giving you, or even put the account on credit hold if you need to wait for a payment before you can schedule more trips for that account. The trip services screen is where we're going to start getting into some of the billing tools within RoutingBox. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up our Logisticare rates here. And you'll see that based on all the different parameters that might happen for a trip, including client class, the reason for the trip, mode of transportation, seating need, other needs, things like, is it a two-man assist? Do they need a car seat? Is there an aid required? Do they need oxygen on board? Are there stairs and the ramp, etc.? So we can put all that information in here into this grid, all the different combinations of trips you might take. And that will go ahead and apply the proper code and modifier, as well as the proper rates based on all those different combinations. So when a trip is scheduled, we can get the proper coding and rates for that trip immediately, especially if that client wants to know the rate for the trip. Having that information right at your call taker's finger hands really is a powerful tool. So that's going to be one of the really great tools you'll see within RoutingBox is that trip services screen and that grid, being able to code and price those trips immediately when they are scheduled. So that's all for this section. So let's go ahead and move on. Let's go ahead and take a look at how trips get into the RoutingBox software, starting with the trip importer. The trip importer functions in two different ways. The first is to import trips from a file which is saved to your computer. Now this could be a CSV file, perhaps a text file, or even a PDF, and usually it comes from your portal that you have with that payer or broker. It could also be a file that's emailed to you. So maybe someone sends you an email with a PDF file of all of your trips, or a CSV file, an Excel file. RoutingBox will go in and export that data after you save the file to your computer. A good example of a payer that we do this with is MTM. So I'll use that as our example. So we go ahead and tell it we want MTM trips, and we're going to choose the file that I've saved to my computer that I imported from my MTM portal. So once I choose the file, RoutingBox will import that file and extract all of the trip data off of that and bring it into the grid. Now the other way that we can bring trips into RoutingBox is through a kind of a direct connection, or what's called an API connection. So the way this works is It's a direct connection to your broker or payer's servers. So here we have MAS, so we have a direct connection to MAS where we can go and get your trip data. So we choose the date that we want to import. Do we want all of our trips, new or changed trips, new trips, etc.? We go ahead and I'm going to choose all trips for the purposes of this demo, and we're actually directly connecting to MAS to go ahead and pull that information into the software. So you'll see here we've pulled these trips into the grid, and we're going to come back to this and talk about some of the other things that the trip importer does in a moment. Now, a couple payers that we have in terms of the file. So in New York State, the very popular ones, I mentioned MTM. National MedTrans also has a file import. Fidelis sends you that PDF file. We can import from them. The direct connection, we have a connection with MAS, a direct connection through something called ATMS with Logisticare, and then also Sentry and CTG. Now, each of these function a little bit differently, so I'd like to go through them one by one and give you some details around that. So MAS, you saw the direct connection. We go and we pull the trips down. We do also have the ability to do an automatic import with MAS, where every 3 minutes we'll go and look for trips that appear on the same day. Now, one of the cool things about that is you may know that MAS is going to stop alerting you of a same-day trip. They're not going to call anymore. They're just going to give you the trip if it falls within your capacity. So when you click up here, I don't have any notifications right now, but you'll see this blank panel. This is the notifications panel. So very similarly to when you get a text message on your phone, when a new trip comes in from an auto import from MAS or one of the other imports that I'm going to mention shortly, you'll actually get a little kind of a red number here that shows you that there's a new notification waiting for your attention. So it'll alert you that a new trip has come in. So that auto import is a very cool feature. There is some additional cost associated with that, so you'll want to talk to your NMT expert and go through your pricing to make sure that that's included if that's something that you want. So again, you can either pull it down on your own, or if you want an automatic import where it runs every 3 minutes and brings all today's trips in to look for new trips or changes to trips, we can certainly do that as well. Now, Logisticare is just the direct pull. It's the very same process as MAS. You just choose Logisticare ATMS instead. The only difference is you need to log in with your credentials. So when you go through and you tell it what date you want, it pops up with the login page, and you put in your Logisticare credentials, and then that allows you to go ahead and import your trips. Sentry operates very similarly to the MAS auto import. It is an automatic import that runs on its own, and then when new trips or changes come through, the notification system will take over and let you know that that has happened. CTG is very similar in terms of your experience, very much the same. The difference is CTG actually pushes us the trips and we go and grab them, versus the other two, we're actually going and asking on a consistent interval if there are trips. So on the back end, technically, it's a little bit different. In terms of your experience on the front end, everything is the same in terms of those automatic imports. So those trips, again, they come in on their own, and then all you have to do is check the notifications to make sure you know what is happening. Now, for those automatic imports, you do lose some of the really cool validations that happen from the trip importer. So, for example, one of those, we see that some of our clients here are bold and green. That means that's someone that we do not have a client profile. We have never transported or had transportation scheduled for that person before. So if you want to call and give them a welcome call or maybe confirm those appointments, you'll be alerted as to who those new clients are. Clients that are standard text, like this one, those clients have a profile, so they've at least been scheduled to have transportation with us before, most likely. So for those clients, the trip importer is going to do some analysis. And one of the biggest things, if you're doing both ambulette and livery trips, so you're doing wheelchair trips as well, it will confirm the mode of transportation. So if this person in the past, if we have on file that they're a wheelchair seating need, and it's telling us that this is a livery trip, it's going to alert you to that to let you know that that could be a potential mistake. It might be that that person, maybe they broke their leg and they healed and they can walk fine now. But it could also be a mistake where you don't want to send out the wrong vehicle type to pick up a trip. So we're going to alert you to that potential issue. The other validation, which is done with the automatic import. So that validation does not work with the automatic import. But the other one that does work with all of these is the address being geocoded. So you'll see the addresses here. Geocoding means that we're running the address against a database. We actually use Microsoft MapPoint as our first, with Google as the backup. MapPoint is the primary simply because it actually goes a little bit further past the decimal point in terms of the number of decimal places, so it does lead to a little bit greater accuracy. So when we map that trip, we can be as precise as possible. So we're going to run it through Microsoft first, see if we can find it. If we can't find it there, Google is the backup. If we can't find it there, you're going to get a message indicating that that address could not be geocoded. So what happens is at that point you can go in and fix it. Usually it's something like, instead of Smith Street, it's actually Smith Road, or maybe this 21 Fox Street, it should be 21 Fox Road. When you figure out the issue, make the change, it'll offer you the ability to save that change for future trips. So anytime 21 Fox Street in Poughkeepsie comes up in the future, it will automatically change for me to 21 Fox Road in Poughkeepsie. So it saves that change so we don't have to make it over and over again if your broker or payer keeps making the same mistake for whatever reason. Sometimes they can get that fixed quickly. Sometimes for whatever reason it seems to sit there in their systems for a while before it corrects itself. So that address validation is very valuable in terms of making sure that whatever information you're giving the driver is complete and accurate. It's very easy for them to figure out where they are going. Now, I mentioned that does exist with the automatic imports. It exists in that we attempt to geocode the addresses and we do consider those corrections. What happens with the automatic imports, since you're not at the screen for it to give you a fail message, is you'll actually get an email that tells you that there were trips that were unsuccessful in importing. It'll give you the reason, and then you'll be able to actually get a file that you click on and you could put into the importer, and all the trip data will be there, and you just have to go and make the modifications that you need necessary. So very simple process if you're using even that automatic import as well. Some trips may not come in through an importer if your payer doesn't have an import file, or maybe it's an add-on trip for the same day. So for those, we're going to enter them through our scheduling tool, which is built to be very streamlined and easy to use. So let's start with the client's profile. I referenced this in regards to the trip importer, that the importer creates the profile. So if this is a situation where we're not importing trips, you'll create the profile or search and find the profile for the person that you want to schedule a trip for. Just like the other pieces of RoutingBox, you'll see there's kind of as much or as little information here as you'd like to capture. The basics include just the passenger's name, their address, their needs, and obviously you'll probably want to assign which payer account they'll be associated with so you know how their trips are going to be paid for. There is the ability to add a requirement for date of birth and gender based on the payer account. So let's say for your Medicaid trips, you need to keep track of that information for your billing files. We can go ahead and require that in order to save this passenger as part of your Medicaid account, those fields would have to be filled in. So here we have our profile complete, so we're going to go ahead and go to the screen to schedule a trip. So here is our trip scheduler. You'll see that a lot of the information has translated over from that client profile. So we have obviously the passenger's name, the payer account that they're going to be billed for, their home address, as well as their trip needs. Now from there, we'll go ahead and put in some more information. So we're going to put in the purpose for transportation as well as the mode of transportation. We can enter the address 3 different ways. The first is just simply typing it out. And you'll see that we have that green check mark up here, which means that the trip has been geocoded. Just like we talked about with the trip importer, each and every address that's entered is geocoded through that same system. And we immediately map the trip and calculate the mileage for you so that we can properly assign rates and coding to the trip. So see here we have a base code. There's no mileage code because this is less than a half mile. So when we go ahead and go with a different address. So this is the second way to enter addresses into the system, which would be a location. You can save locations and obviously their addresses, and then when you select that location, you'll see the address fills right in. Again, same thing, the mileage fills in, and now we have our mileage code. Now there can be scripting done for different rounding rules depending on how you round your mileages, so don't worry about that. This is just the way that mine is set up, is to round down. Now the third way to enter an address is through the Google Places API. So what that means is kind of like on your phone when you go into like your mapping application, you start typing in the name of a place and it finds it for you. Similar situation here where we use that API to go in, and when we type the name of that location, it finds us the address. Again, it's geocoded. We calculate the mileage, apply the proper rates and coding based on those trip parameters. Now let's go back and set the time for our trip. We can set it as either the pickup or the drop-off, so depending on which one is the critical piece for you, you can choose which one and it'll drive the other. So let's say this is for a 5 p.m. appointment. We can go ahead and enter 5 p.m. and then the system will tell us that we need to pick them up by 4:29 p.m. in order to have them there on time. Now that time is calculated based on the mapped route from the pickup to the drop-off location. It will also consider load and unload time. So we can put a padding time in based on the mode of transportation, because obviously, a wheelchair is going to be different than someone who's walking without assistance in terms of the time to get in and out of the vehicle. So we can put that padding time in for each trip so that we can properly calculate the pickup time. So if I actually move this to an ambulette trip, you'll see it added 10 minutes there for that padding time. Now, if this is a recurring trip, I can actually set that very quickly and easily. I can choose my recurrence, whether it be one of the options here, or I can customize it by selecting the boxes that I want. I select the end date for that recurrence. So let's say this one's through the end of the year. And we can even add exclusions. So if we know that, for example, that our passenger is going to be traveling for the holiday, we can exclude those dates so that passenger will not appear on my roster for those dates. So I've set this trip to run every day through the end of the year, except for July 2nd through 6th when my patient's going to be out of town. Now the last piece is scheduling a return ride, which is very simple. We just click that little yellow circle with the kind of swirling arrows in there, and that's going to schedule the return ride. It defaults to a will call, but if it's a scheduled time, that's no problem. So let's say this was a 5 p.m. appointment. We want it to be a 6 p.m. Pickup. We can set a pickup for 6 p.m. And you'll see that again, it calculated my time for the drop-off, and everything in my rates went ahead and doubled. So everything is all set to save this trip. So then once I save the trip, it'll go into my dispatching screen, which is where we're going to head next for dispatching and routing. Now that we have our trips in RoutingBox, let's go take a look at the driver assignment screen and the dispatching screen. The driver assignment screen is where you will enter your driver and vehicle combinations that will be working during the day. We can copy assignments from previous dates, or if your drivers generally drive the same vehicles, we can use the Assign Typical Vehicles function to assign them. From here, you can assign a start and end time for each driver's shift, as well as make any changes that you need to the driver and vehicle schedule. So if a driver is driving a different vehicle, or perhaps a driver isn't driving that day, you can make those adjustments quickly and easily. Once our driver assignments are perfect, we can go ahead and move on to the dispatch screen. Now the dispatch screen is very customizable in terms of what the end user sees. Using the view section, you can choose which pieces of information that a dispatcher can see. And you have over 50 different fields here that can be selected from. Once you have the fields that you'd like, you can go ahead and save that view so you can quickly and easily access it next time. So if each of your dispatchers like things slightly differently in terms of the way the information is presented to them, they can certainly set it up that way. So from the dispatch screen, we have the assignment column, which is where the driver and vehicle that are assigned to that vehicle or that trip will go. So if I want to assign this trip to Michael, I can simply choose him from the drop-down, and now he's been assigned the trip for Ryan, and we'll get that in the RoutingBox mobile application, which we'll cover in the next section. So I'm going to go ahead and actually assign a couple driver and vehicle combinations to make some things happen. So the first is the pop-up that just happened. If you serve multiple modes of transportation and the trip does not match the vehicle that we're trying to assign it to, so in this case it looks like we're trying to assign a livery vehicle to serve an ambulette trip. So in those situations, we'll get a pop-up that asks us, are you sure you want to assign this? This setting has 3 different ways that it can display. The first is that it does nothing at all. So if you either have all of your vehicles are the same and can service all of your trips, or if you only service one mode of transportation, you'll have that setting turned off. If you can have it like this, if you want to just get a warning, but there's certain circumstances where you might override that, you would want it to be just the warning setting. There is then kind of a harsh setting where your dispatchers will absolutely not be allowed to assign vehicles that don't match the mode of transportation. So you can do it any of those 3 ways with that setting. So in this case, I'm going to say, you know what, I am okay with this. For whatever reason, I'm going to allow this to happen. So I'll allow Jennifer to handle that trip. So we can go ahead and I'm going to assign some of these trips to our drivers here just to get them kind of out and working for the day. And then we can take a look at some of the other features here. So another one is the zone and mode filter features. So if I want to see just my ambulette trips so that I can get those assigned to the proper vehicles, or maybe just my livery trips, I can filter it down. So a lot of companies that do both like to get their wheelchair trips assigned first, since the wheelchair vehicles can usually handle ambulatory trips, but not vice versa. So we can do it that way. The other cool thing that we can do is filter by zone. So a zone, as we had touched on briefly earlier, is a set of zip codes that might be close together that we're going to use for dispatching. You may use zones for other things in terms of billing, but we're just going to focus on the dispatching features here. So within that zone, we have a bunch of trips that are closely close together in terms of their geographical location. So we maybe want to put those within the same one or two vehicles to try to make things very, very easy for our drivers without putting in too much deadhead mileage. Obviously, efficiency is critical when it comes to assigning our drivers, so we want to find trips that are close together as much as possible. Now, the other dispatching filter that a lot of our customers like to take advantage of is the assignment suggestion tool. So the way that works is when I right-click on an empty assignment, so I'm right-clicking here, that is going to go ahead and pull up the assignment suggestion tool. That tool will actually look at all of our vehicles and what they are currently doing, as well as when we think they're going to complete their current task, and then their ETA for being able to arrive to pick up this trip. So you'll see these, the ETC, that's the estimated time of completion, including load or unload time, the travel time to that destination, and then their ETA. So I can sort this by travel time, which will give me the lower travel times first, or I can sort by ETA, which will give me who can get there the fastest, since they're not always the same based on when someone is going to free up. You'll see that these aren't quite sorted quite in order, and the reason for that is you'll see these are our wheelchair vehicles, these are the taxis, and this is giving priority to the wheelchair vehicles because this is a wheelchair trip. If I go and do the same thing on a taxi call, you're going to see the taxis are going to get priority over the wheelchair vehicles. You'll also see my ETAs are no longer in red. That's because in this case, these drivers are not going to be late to do that pickup. So this is allowing me to say, hey, who can get there with the least amount of wasted travel time? So in this case, it looks like that's Jen, so I'm going to go ahead and assign that trip to Jen. As I move on to my next one, it looks like John is my best choice, so I can go ahead and assign the trip to John. Now, if I get the trips that are a little more immediate and happening right now, or maybe I'm even running late for, you're going to see that these are red. I might want to go with the shortest ETA, even though it might not be the most efficient trip because I'm already running late. I want to provide quality service, or the best quality service I can provide to my clients. So I might look at the shortest ETA instead of just the shortest travel time, because they're not always the same thing. This is a prime example. John is the most efficient driver, but he's not going to be available until 5:52 and not be able to get there until 6 o'clock. I'm already running late, so even though Mike has a 20-minute drive, he's got to drive nearly twice as far, actually more than twice as far as John in this case. He can get there almost a full 2 hours sooner. So because I'm running late, I'm going to give this trip to Mike. So essentially what we're doing here is we're providing your dispatcher with the tools that they need to be able to make the best possible decisions. We know that there's some things out there that tell you that you can click this button and get the best possible routes. And the reason we haven't done that, it's actually quite easy to do. There's a tool called the Traveling Salesman, if you want to Google it and check things out. But it's an algorithm that puts together all the different route combinations. And the problem with that is, in non-emergency medical transportation, there are so many factors that come into play. Some trips are valued different monetarily, and you have to treat them differently for that reason. Some accounts, they pay you differently, or have different expectations of you based on your contract with that payer. And then you have just the cancellations and all of the change that happens during the day. Our customers experience somewhere on an average of 25% change in their trip data from when the day starts to when the day finishes, between changes in location, changes in time, no-shows, same-day cancels, same-day add-ons. There's so many things that happen throughout the day that you just can't expect, that having this pre-scheduled perfect schedule that's put together isn't so perfect by the end of the day when all of that change happens. So we've wanted to create tools that allow your dispatchers and schedulers and call takers to take the information that they have in front of them and give them the tools to make the best possible decisions for your business based on what your definition of what the best route is, not someone else's definition that created a button that you can press. So it's a little bit different than what you might see from some other software providers. But the goal here is to put you in the best position to have the best routes possible. Accurate routing is critical to the success of any EMT business, especially one that is looking to grow. Your cost of your driver labor, as well as your vehicle maintenance and fuel, are the biggest costs that you will incur most likely. So being able to handle as many trips as you can in an efficient manner while providing quality service so that your clients are recommending you and requesting you and continuing to want to get rides from you is critical to your business. So our standpoint is, let's give you the tools to make sure that you get the absolute best routing possible based on what is important to your business. Now, I have covered really just a fraction of the dispatching and scheduling tools that RoutingBox offers. Each company operates very, very differently within these tools depending on exactly what's important to you. For example, we have runs, which are great if you have maybe contractor drivers that manage your relationships with your clients, and if you have Mrs. Jones who goes to dialysis every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Bob is the driver that always takes her, we can actually assign trips to what are called runs, and with one click you can always assign those trips to those drivers that always get them. Or perhaps it's just a route. You have some kind of pre-planned routes around your trips that are recurring, and then you use the other trips to kind of fill in the gaps in those routes. That's another great use for the runs tool, as well as some other tools we have. We have some great mapping tools within the run builder and within that assignment suggestion tool that I told you about, where you can actually see a map of the driver's route and how adding this trip is going to modify their route. So that's what that looks like. So there's some really great tools here, but they are different from company to company and how your strategy works within your company when it comes to scheduling and dispatching. So I've showed you kind of a brief preview and gone through our philosophy on scheduling and dispatching. What I'd like you to do is, in your meeting, if it is already scheduled with your assigned NEMT expert, this is something that you'll go into much more detail on. Or if you haven't scheduled your meeting with your NEMT expert yet, please scroll down on the page. You'll see there's a link there to go ahead and book your meeting. That will connect to a link that syncs with your expert's calendar, and we'll show you times that they're available to meet. Get that meeting scheduled so that we can go into detail about how this can work for you, because it is very, very different from company to company. So I want to make sure everyone's aware that I've shown you just a small piece of the puzzle here just to show you kind of the basics of what we're capable of, but there's a lot of tools in the toolbox here to make that scheduling and dispatching more efficient, because we know how critical that is to a growing company. So check that out, and we're going to go ahead and move on now to the driver application. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and pull the driver app up here. Now, our driver application is a native app that is installed on your device. It is not accessed through the web browser. We're doing this through the web browser on the computer because we need to be able to show it to you for the purposes of the demo. So we've replicated it into a website here so we can do that. So when the driver opens their app on their tablet, this is what they're going to see. They can go ahead and select their name and then enter their PIN number. And when they log in, we have an optional setting here that can require them to do a daily vehicle inspection report if you need to do that either for regulatory reasons or because you just want that done on a daily basis to maintain your vehicles. For the driver to do that, it tells them go to the menu, bottom left, to open the checklist, and then they can go ahead and complete their inspection. So that starts with an odometer reading and then moves on to the different pieces of the vehicle that they're going to be checking on. Now, those are decided by you, so you decide what goes in these fields here that the driver will check. Obviously, if you're required to check certain things by law, then you're going to want to do that, and then you can add anything else that you need to check or that you want to check to that list. That driver then signs, signifying this is to the best of their knowledge, and now we can see our trips for the day. Now, this is set currently into our stop view. This is great if you're doing a bit of multi-loading. It lays things out for the driver in kind of the order of their stops, their pickups, and their drop-offs. So here I'm picking up Wade, then dropping off Wade, picking up Leroy, picking up Peter, picking up Wade, dropping off Peter, dropping off Leroy, dropping off Wade. So I have a couple sets of trips here. Now, we can turn the stop view off, in which case the driver will just see each trip individually. That's recommended if a vast majority of your trips are kind of single ride. We only have one person in the vehicle. There's no need to obviously differentiate between pickup and drop off, since they're picking someone up and then dropping them off. For each trip, once they touch the trip field here, it'll pull up the trip details, which shows you the passenger's name, their mode of transportation, pickup time and address, drop-off time and address, and then any notes that are associated with that individual will appear down here. Those notes could come from the individual trip field, if it's something about that trip that the office staff put in, or it could come from the client profile. So if there's notes on the client profile that have been released to the driver, they'll be able to see those there. Notes can be taken that either the dispatcher can see, the driver can see, both or neither, if it's something you only want your administrative staff to have visibility to. The driver has some tools here to help them go through and complete their work through the day. The first is this GPS pin. What this does is open the Google Maps app on the device with the address already loaded. So all they have to do is start directions, and they're on their way with directions to the site. The phone icon will actually dial out to a phone number that is on file for the client if there is a default calling app on your mobile device. If there is not a default calling app, it will simply display the phone number so that you can call from another mobile device. If there is no phone number on file for the client, but there is one for the location that they are being picked up at, in this case, or being dropped off at, then it will dial the location instead. So if you have folks, say, at a rehab facility and you need to let them know that you're running late, it'll actually be that phone number on file instead of the client's, and you can go ahead and it'll dial that for the driver if you want your drivers able to communicate with your clients directly in the field. Now the driver's job is extremely easy within RoutingBox. All they need to do is click this arrow to update the status, and that will move it forward one status at a time. And the statuses for the driver are that they've received the trip, which is their acknowledgement to dispatch that they understand that they're responsible for it, when they're en route to pickup, when they've arrived at the pickup location, when they're en route to drop off, arrive at the drop off, and then obviously completing the trip. We do have the ability for drivers to select no-show. That can also be turned off if you don't want the driver to be able to do it and you want to force them to call back to dispatch to get that completed, because dispatch can then reach out to the client, confirm the no-show, etc. You can do that. It's up to you. People do it both ways. Now, if I try to select completed here, it's actually going to reject that. And the reason is that I have the requirement for signatures turned on for the payer account that Wade belongs to. So it is determined by account. So if you have, perhaps you're doing Medicaid trips that you want to capture signatures for, or logistic care trips that you're required to capture signatures for, but then you also have trips for a nursing home that you don't really worry about a signature, we can turn it off for the nursing home and leave it on for logistic care and for Medicaid. So you have some flexibility there to only be forcing the driver to collect signatures on the trips and the accounts that you want them to. So to collect the signature, the driver just clicks the pencil icon here. We can collect both the client and or the driver's signature. So in some states, we require a driver attestation as part of your state Medicaid guidelines, or certain accounts want the driver to sign off that the trip was completed. We can certainly turn that on. Again, it's on an account-by-account basis. Or we can do just the client signature, or again, obviously both. So you can do driver, client, both, or neither. So now that we've collected that signature, it will allow us to go ahead and complete out that trip. Now, as the driver is updating the status, whether it be through the button or by selecting it here, a few things are going to happen. The first is that it will update the dispatch screen. So this status column here will update with the current status of the trip. The screen refreshes automatically every 30 seconds. You just saw that little orange globe kind of turn gray there for a second. That was the screen doing its refresh. And again, that's automatic every 30 seconds. The mobile app also refreshes every 30 seconds. So the information you're seeing is live, and they just did that again. So the second thing that happens is we capture the actual time that driver updated the status. So we actually collect the time that they've arrived at the pickup location, or the time that they've arrived at the drop-off location, etc. Those pieces of information obviously become critical for just managing your business, and you'll be able to see that on reporting, but also could be very important when it comes to billing. A lot of payers now are asking for the actual time you arrived at the pickup, actual time you arrived at the drop-off, etc. We can collect that information automatically, so it doesn't need to be handwritten in and potentially illegible or transferred from one system to another. It's all right here in RoutingBox to make it nice and easy for you. The third thing that's happening is every time we're updating a status or collecting a signature even, we're going to collect the location of where that happened. So you'll be able to see where the driver is collecting all their signatures, where they are when they're saying they've arrived at pickup, arrived at drop-off, etc. You'll be able to see where those things happen And in the case of an audit, you'll be able to prove where they happened. So you can prove that when the driver said he arrived at the pickup location, he was there. When he said he arrived at the drop-off, he was indeed there as well. So very powerful information to help you run your business, and also to make sure you have good solid proof that these trips are actually happening if you should face an audit. So now we've distributed our trips out to the drivers after bringing them into the software. The drivers have completed the trips. We've captured all the information we need for billing. Let's take a look at some of the billing tools that RoutingBox has to offer, starting with EDI billing, which is billing through an electronic file. To do EDI billing, all you need to do is select a date range and then the account that you'd like to bill for. So we'll do Logisticare. And all of the trips that are in a billing ready status that meet that date range and the account will show up here in the grid. We can change this to all trips, but billing ready is great because it will be all of your trips that are completed, or if you're billing for no-shows or cancellations for an account, any trips that reach that cancellation or no-show status will go into that ready status as well. But once a trip is billed, it will move out of ready status and into billed status. So it makes sure that we're not double billing any of our trips. So we have all of our trips in the grid here. We'll go through the trip viewer a little bit later, and that will actually help you put together some reports to make sure that all of your information is complete when it comes to generating these files. Also, if you try to generate a file and there's missing required information, RoutingBox will actually kick that back and reject the creation of that file and let you know for those trips that information is missing so that you can go back and get it fixed before resubmitting. The next step is to just hit this create button here, and it will show you all the different billing formats that we have. So in this case, since we're doing Logisticare, we would choose ATMS, which is that direct connection we talked about when we were bringing the trips in through the importer. That same direct connection allows us to send all of the billing data, even including the signatures, directly to Logisticare through that direct connection. We also have MTM, another national broker. That's an electronic batch billing file that we generate that can be uploaded to their portal along with a signature file that you can create out of RoutingBox to satisfy your signature requirement to again kind of perform that batch billing functionality. MTM in some states does require the GPS. That's why you see another GPS report there. The other very popular billing file is an 837p, which is a standard HIPAA file for across the country for submitting transportation claims. The P is for professional, so it's professional claims. And so this is something that if you work with health plans, so groups like Fidelis or Kalos or iCircle, Hamaspic, ICS, Metro Plus, etc., these groups that you're working with a health plan directly, in those cases, they can be billed generally with an 837p file through a clearinghouse. So you have a relationship with the clearinghouse, which is where you upload this file, and then that's how that gets over to your payer. So using EDI billing, it really gives you some great options with all the different accounts you work with to streamline your billing process and save a whole bunch of time. RoutingBox offers two different types of paper billing solutions. Both can be found in the report section under the billing tab here. The first that I will go through will be paper invoices. So if you have accounts, in a lot of cases this might be if you work in private facility work, nursing homes, corporate accounts, things like that, where you're just sending a paper invoice. That's where this comes in. It operates very, very similarly to the EDI billing in terms of generating the actual billing file. We're going to enter a date range, choose the account that we want to bill, and then we have some options. So if we want, each client to have separate invoices. Some payers want that so they can assign costs by client. How far out is the invoice due? Should each trip leg have its own line? How do we want to number the invoices? Things like that. And then click OK to generate. To save some time, I actually have one that we already generated to be able to show you this to you. So here's an invoice generated by RoutingBox. We have the passenger's name, where they're traveling from, where they're traveling to, along with the date. And you'll see the services rendered here. We can't have the member number appear after their name if that's needed as well. So if there's some sort of member ID that needs to be on the invoice, that appears in parentheses after the person's name if that exists on their client profile. You'll see here that the invoice, it'll have your address as the return address, the client's address as to where it's being billed to, based on the payment date that you chose in the settings. We'll have the payment date and then the invoicing sequence that you chose will generate the invoice number for you. Then obviously at the bottom, we're going to go ahead and get a grand total for that invoice. So no more manually transferring things to another system or putting things into Excel to generate your invoices. Because RoutingBox knows which trips were completed, we can generate that file right out of RoutingBox. Now the other file that works in very much the same fashion is a CMS 1500. So that is this report within RoutingBox, but very, very similar. We're choosing date range and the account that we want to bill for, and then RoutingBox will go ahead and fill this form in for you. CMS 1500 is kind of the old paper version, where an 837 has kind of taken over. A lot of payers will still use these CMS 1500s, or it's very costly to use a clearinghouse, so you may want to use the paper form still. RoutingBox has the ability to print out the entire form, or for some payers they want you to feed the official forms into your printer and then have the information printed onto them. RoutingBox does support that functionality as well. So no more, you can imagine how time consuming this is for your biller to fill that in, or if you're doing it on your own, you know how time consuming this is to fill out. RoutingBox will take care of all that work for you, and all you have to do is print it out and get it out to your payer so that you can get paid. So some very cool tools for both new age electronic billing, as well as maybe even some of the older formats that some of your payers may want. We can do all of that within RoutingBox and save you hours and hours of time when it comes to generating your billing. For those of you that are working in New York State and are doing trips with MAS that need to be signed off or attested to with MAS, we've got you covered there as well. Under the billing tab, you'll see there's the attest icon, which will pull up this screen. We're going to choose the date range that we want to attest for if it's not one day. I'd say most of our providers do this daily, and we'll tell it which accounts need to be attested to. We can do that by account class or the account specifically. But then from there, we have all of our trips that went through from that account for the day. We're going to go ahead and select all and hit that MAS direct attestation. And through that same direct connection with MAS that we use to pull all the trips into the software, we're going to go ahead and send them back the attestation info, the driver's license number, as well as the plate number of the vehicle that handled that trip. So a huge time savings there for those of you in New York that are signing off on those one by one through the MAS portal. We can make that quick and efficient each day. Since RoutingBox collected all the information, we know which trips were completed, which trips were canceled, which were no-showed. We know which drivers and vehicles did it. So we have all that information to send over to MAS through that direct connection. So a huge time savings for those of you in New York. Let's go ahead now and take a look at some of the reporting functions within RoutingBox. So you'll see each tab does have a reports icon here. We can generate reports associated with that specific tab. So in operations, for example, we can do some driver manifests. We can do a dispatch sheet, which shows all the trips for a day. We can look at what the vehicle checklists that have been completed are, etc. Client attendance reports, which drivers are active, which vehicles are active. All of that can be exported right here from these reports. All of the reports are exportable to Excel and to a PDF file. Now, probably the most powerful reporting tool we have is this trip viewer. So you may remember when we were looking at the dispatch screen, we could customize the view to show you all sorts of different information. There were over 50 different fields that we could display to the dispatchers. The trip viewer does the same thing, but actually adds in some of the trip data that the dispatchers may not need to see. So it's over 60 fields plus any custom fields that you'd like, just like the trip viewer. So as I'm adding these, that's adding the fields into the report here. And then I can resize them. I can move them around if I want to. I can change the order they appear in, however I want to do that. And then I can do some filtering based on the trip status, the billing status. So I mentioned that we can get some great AR reporting. We can see maybe trips that are ready to be billed for 2 months ago, which should have already been billed out but haven't been billed yet. You can produce a report to make sure there's nothing sitting and waiting for billing that didn't happen. We can run trips that are billed, maybe that were billed 90 plus days ago that your payer hasn't paid you for, to see and find trips that you need to follow up on with your payer. We can sort by account class, by the purpose of transportation, by the mode, even by individual medical providers. So you have a lot of tools here. Driver, if you want to see performance for a specific driver. You choose the date range that you'd like and then click the button, and it will go ahead and generate your report with all of the data that you have requested. So I actually just requested a report for completed trips today, there's no data there. If I go to all trips today and regenerate that same report, we're going to see all of the trips scheduled or completed that show up for today. Now, once I have my report, if I need to use it for something else, I can actually go down here and export that report to an Excel file so that I can use it or manipulate it or maybe utilize the data in another fashion. So whatever information you're looking for, however you need it presented, however you want it filtered, the Trip Viewer puts all of that together for you and makes it very easy to get the information that you need to manage your business. Alright, we've almost covered all of our kind of key points within RoutingBox. Now again, this is meant to be just a very high-level overview to make sure you know which questions to ask when you meet with your expert. We're not showing you everything RoutingBox has to offer. We're certainly not going to answer all of your questions or solve all of the problems that I'm sure you have with your business with the things that we've covered. So make sure you scroll down, click the link, schedule a meeting with your assigned NEMT expert if you haven't already. That link will take you right where you need to go to do that so that we can take a deeper dive into RoutingBox and do a one-on-one and really answer those questions. Before we let you go, there's one more thing that I would like to show you, and that is Client Link, which is our white label customer-facing application. So again, we've kind of replicated this into a web browser for you so that you can see what the experience looks like. But here's kind of how Client Link works. So we're going to go ahead and first, the client is going to sign up. So these are your riders that are using this application. When they sign up, we're going to take this information and run an algorithm and attempt to match it to their client profile within RoutingBox. And that is the secret sauce that Client Link has that makes it very unique. What that allows us to do is, since we can tie it to the profile, which is tied to all of that client's trips, we can show the client their vehicle and their ETA and their vehicle coming towards them via GPS for all of their trips, not just trips scheduled through the app, but all of their trips, whether it be scheduled through a broker, through Medicaid, through a caretaker, through a facility, whatever it might be. Those trips can be viewed right on the mobile application. So when their driver indicates that they're on their way to pick that client up, that is when the vehicle will appear. We had to do that for HIPAA reasons. We can't show clients where perhaps another client might live. So once that vehicle indicates they're on their way, it'll show up to the passenger. They'll see them coming towards them, along with an ETA as well as vehicle information, so they know exactly what's going on with their trip. Now the client can also, if their next trip up is a will call, this green ready button will illuminate, and when they hit that button, that will actually indicate to the dispatcher in RoutingBox that they are ready to be picked up so that a vehicle can be assigned. So we've eliminated all of the where's my vehicle phone calls. We've also eliminated all of those return ride calls from will call passengers as well. Now, let's go ahead and book a trip through the mobile application and show you what that experience is like, as it is also designed specifically for NEMT. So we have, the location will default the pickup address if you'd like, and then you can indicate where they're going. They'll indicate here whether it's a return ride as well as the time that the passenger should be picked up. So here we have, are there any special needs? That list is generated by your needs list within RoutingBox, so it's going to show all of the services that you offer. We are also going to ask, how is the trip going to be paid for? Is it being paid for by the consumer directly or by an account? If it is paid for by an account, we can actually turn on the ability to make sure and check that there's authorization for that trip. So within the client profile, there's actually an authorization screen that your NEMT expert will show you when you do your demo if you want to. And you'll be able to authorize, say, Jim can take 6 trip legs for 200 miles this month. Jim will have that in his profile. When Jim books trips, those trips will go against his authorizations. So once that is, those authorizations are completely exhausted, Jim will not be allowed to book trips on his account anymore from the mobile app. That passenger can also take notes, so if there's something they need to know about the location, if it's a nursing home and they want you to pick them up at the south door, they can put that information in there. So then we'll confirm the booking, and that trip then goes right into RoutingBox. We can place restrictions such as, you can only book trips at least 24 hours out. We can remove the booking abilities altogether if you just want the tracking abilities for the passengers. A lot of flexibility, again, just like a home RoutingBox, in terms of how this is utilized. But this is a very, very powerful tool to create transparency for your clients, to reduce the number of phone calls coming into your office, and increase overall rider satisfaction. We're also seeing that this can lead to an increase in private pay booking since your app is already on the passenger's mobile device. It makes it very, very easy to make a self-pay booking for a trip to the grocery store, to the mall, or wherever it may be, since your app is already there and they know and trust you from service you provided to them. So that is all we have for our demo today. So again, bottom of the screen, scroll down a little bit from here. You're going to see the link that says to book a meeting with your NEMT expert. So you want to go ahead and click that link if you don't have something booked already, and pick a time that works for you. You'll get a calendar invite, as will your assigned expert from our team, so that we can have a one-on-one meeting. We'll dive into RoutingBox and go through details around your organization and how RoutingBox can help you. If you'd like, you can also give us a call. If you don't have your representative's specific contact information, our general number is 716-202-9121. Again, thank you so much for watching today and taking the time to learn more about RoutingBox. We are looking forward to helping you get on a route to better business.